Every major city hides something, but in Kansas City, it isn't just secrets behind closed doors, it's secrets under your feet. Beneath the streets, past the limestone and the mail trucks, is a network so vast, so carefully edited from public memory, that even seasoned investigators walk away speechless. Some say it's just storage, some say it's something much darker. In this episode, we follow the clues that lead far below the surface, and into a hidden world no one was meant to find. Beneath Kansas City lies something few people know exists, an underground city carved from limestone. Known officially as Subtropolis, it spans over 55 million square feet and stretches like veins beneath the earth. To some, it's just a massive storage facility, but others believe it's something much more deliberate. The official story is simple. Subtropolis is a privately owned business park, housing everything from data centers to US postal vehicles. It boasts natural climate control, security, and distance from prying eyes. But skeptics say this is exactly what makes it the perfect front. And once you start looking, really looking, you'll find pieces that don't add up. Like the fact that Subtropolis has entrances not listed on official maps, or that contractors hired to do seemingly basic work often sign lifetime NDAs, or the strange hum that technicians say pulses through certain corridors, low, rhythmic, like breathing. The limestone caverns themselves were formed hundreds of millions of years ago, but the man-made expansions began in the 1940s. Since then, they've continued to dig layer by layer. But who's really controlling that expansion? The Hunt family, original owners of the land, have kept records sealed for decades. Even city officials admit there are sections of the cave system no longer under local jurisdiction, and that's where the stories begin. Delivery drivers speak of restricted doors with retina scanners, no delivery instructions, and guards dressed in unmarked uniforms. Workers whisper of cold corridors, sections where the temperature plummets inexplicably and their radios fail. And then there's the Vanishing. At least 3 workers are said to have gone missing since 1998, their disappearances quietly buried under HR paperwork and reassigned staff. One janitor reportedly left behind a series of handwritten notes describing a second city below the first. His last entry read simply, "They found the door." No official investigation followed, and maybe the strangest part, despite Subtropolis being so large, no comprehensive third-party survey has ever been published. It's the size of 140 football fields, but no one really knows what's in all of it. As we begin our descent into this hidden world, we're not just looking for physical secrets. We're searching for a pattern, a trail of clues left behind like breadcrumbs through the dark, because something down there doesn't want to be found, and it's waited long enough. To understand the myth of Kansas City's tunnels, we need to go back, long before the internet forums, the message board rumors, and the redacted memos. It begins with rock, more specifically, the Bethany Falls limestone formation, one of the most stable geological substrates in the Midwest. That's why this land was quarried. But something unexpected happened during excavation. As the mining crews pushed deeper, they began uncovering voids, tunnels, and caverns that didn't match any blasting logs, in short, spaces that shouldn't have existed. The reports were dismissed at the time as errors or natural fissures. But one journal entry from a foreman in 1951 stands out. He wrote, "We opened up a shaft today, maybe 20 feet down. No tools needed. Already hollow, no light reaches the end. Air was cold like a freezer." His entry ends abruptly mid-sentence. The next day's page is missing. Over the next decade, more anomalies surfaced. In 1959, an underground fire broke out in one of the unexplored wings. No ignition source was found. The company sealed it off with reinforced concrete and removed it from the operational maps. That section, now known only as Zone C, is still marked as off-limits. But drone scans done in 2015 by hobbyists suggest heat signatures still emanate from within. Something down there burns. After mining ended in the early 60s, private development took over. Subtropolis was born, cleaned up, sanitized, presented as the ultimate underground business park. But again, there are gaps. The official site says Subtropolis spans 55 million square feet. But internal logistics reports from companies operating there, PepsiCo, the US Postal Service, Hallmark, reference delivery routes that stretch far beyond those public dimensions. One contractor who requested anonymity told us, "There are doors we're told never to open. We're issued key cards with disabled access to certain wings. I've seen forklifts drive off toward areas that aren't on the logistics board, and they don't come back the same way." Then there are the blueprints. A 1972 Urban Planning Commission map shows Subtropolis as it existed then. But overlaid with a 2010 FEMA emergency shelter map, new corridors appear. Tunnels that bypass known paths, rooms labelled Deep Access Staging and NH Command. What does NH mean? Nuclear hardening, non-human, or just a typo someone forgot to delete? In the late 80s, during a regional geological survey, University of Missouri researchers were allowed limited access to the lower levels. One professor's notes mention anomalous magnetic interference and auditory mirroring. In simpler terms, compasses failed, echoes bounced back wrong. One student assistant claimed she heard her own voice repeated, 10 seconds later, as if something was answering back. Her name was Holly Reiner. 3 weeks after the survey, she was found in her dorm, unconscious, surrounded by dozens of hand-drawn maps. Every map showed the same thing, a spiral descending down, no labels, just a final symbol at the center, a circle with a single eye. She withdrew from school. Her last known location was a spiritual retreat in the Arizona desert. She left behind one sentence in her journal. They built it over something they never understood. Is it all coincidence? A pattern of accidents, omissions, and paranoia? Or has something been hiding in plain sight, beneath a city that never asked what was under its feet? Because the deeper we go, the more clear it becomes. These tunnels weren't just mined, they were discovered. And somewhere along the way, someone decided it was better to build over the truth than face what it really meant. In 1987, a short-lived city ordinance required all subterranean business complexes in the metro area to file updated maps with the Municipal Records Office. Subtropolis complied partially. The submitted schematics outlined a neat rectangular grid of zones, loading areas, and controlled storage wings. But when compared against known GPS coordinates and commercial delivery logs, discrepancies emerged. Some trucks reported travel times that couldn't be explained by the documented tunnel routes. Others logged turnarounds in areas that didn't exist. Around that time, reports began surfacing of strange encounters during night shifts. One former warehouse supervisor who agreed to speak only with voice modulation described hearing footsteps above the ceiling panels, despite being 3 stories underground. Another recalled finding cargo containers that weren't on the manifest. No logos, no serials, just sealed steel stamped with a date that didn't make sense, April 4th, 2032. When asked what was done with them, he paused. They were gone by morning. Forklift marks led nowhere. These might seem like ghost stories until you examine the data. From 1987 to 1995, there were 14 reported power failures in Subtropolis, every one coinciding with seismic readings just above background noise. Not quite earthquakes, not mining blasts. More like pressure waves, internal stress, like something moving, shifting, pressing against the walls. A 1992 engineering report quietly recommended the construction of deep pressure relief channels and a halt to further excavation toward the southeast wing. The recommendation was ignored. That same year, 2 contractors went missing during a scheduled ventilation overhaul. Their last known location, near an unfinished access corridor labelled E-Sector Extension. The entrance was later bricked off. The incident never made the news. But whispers began to spread. Underground forums dedicated to urban exploration and conspiracy theories started mapping phantom corridors, tunnels seen but not documented. Some explorers claimed these paths seemed to rearrange between visits. One even described finding a corridor that looped. After walking straight for 15 minutes, he returned to the spot he'd started, without ever turning. In 2001, a leaked photograph made the rounds. It showed a section of wall deep in the tunnels with embedded ceramic tiles, each bearing different symbols, mathematical notations, anatomical diagrams, and what looked like star charts. A second photo, reportedly taken moments later, showed the wall blank. The authenticity of these images has never been confirmed, but they sparked what's now known as the living infrastructure theory. The idea that the tunnel system somehow evolves, not organically, but systematically, designed to adapt, shift, and obscure. If that sounds impossible, consider this. In 2010, a major audit by the General Services Administration uncovered discrepancies in federal underground facility leases. In one instance, they were paying rent for over 35,000 square feet of tunnel space that didn't appear on any map, old or new. When auditors attempted a site inspection, they were denied entry by private security. The justification? Client access restrictions. To this day, no one knows who that client was. And then there's the auditory phenomena. Multiple security guards have reported hearing voices through intercoms that were never activated. One recorded transmission, dated March 12, 2006, contains a 6-second clip of overlapping whispers. Spectrogram analysis revealed patterns resembling Morse code, but no coherent message. One audio engineer claimed the frequencies used don't occur naturally underground. So, we're left with a patchwork of half-truths. Employees who disappear from records, rooms that shift or vanish, maps that contradict themselves, and structures built not for human convenience but for some deeper, more obscure function. Are we staring at a secret government project, a Cold War relic gone rogue, or is something more abstract at work, a system that resists being understood? Because the deeper we follow the tunnels, the more it begins to feel like they aren't just passages through rock, but an interface, a language, one that speaks in shadows, pressure, and silence. And every time someone gets too close to understanding it, the map changes. Subtropolis was never supposed to grow this far. In its earliest days, it was a mining operation, carving limestone for roadbeds and construction. But over time, the voids became valuable. Controlled climate, natural shielding, a city under a city. What began as extraction evolved into containment. By the 1980s, expansion had accelerated beyond commercial demand. Several zones, designated by lettered sectors, appear in internal memos but never on public maps. Zone K, Zone R, Zone X. These areas weren't listed in lease records, weren't advertised in promotional brochures, and most notably weren't accessible by standard routes. That's when a former city planner, now retired and in hiding, claimed that sections of the tunnel system were being deliberately lost, sealed behind false walls, erased from blueprints. He called them blind vaults, architectural misdirection. The purpose, he said, wasn't security, it was a misplacement. Around that same period, a janitorial contractor working in one of the commercial wings filed a quiet OSHA complaint. He reported an access stairwell that shouldn't be there, leading down into what he described as a listening chamber. Bare concrete, no markings, lined with audio-dampening foam. He swore he could hear a low humming beneath the floor, like a vibration you don't hear so much as feel. The complaint was dismissed. The contractor disappeared 6 weeks later. His apartment was cleared before the family was notified. Another anomaly, sensor echoes. In 1999, a telecom company piloting a fiber-optic backbone through the tunnels reported signal feedback at key junctions. When rerouted, the echoes shifted. Engineers likened it to someone tapping the line from inside the walls. After multiple failed diagnostics, the team received a classified gag order under the guise of network sovereignty. The project was moved above ground. Some researchers have drawn a connection between these blind zones and the long-rumoured echo complex, a phrase found only once, buried in the metadata of a digital zoning archive dated 1994. No official plan by that name exists, but the metadata listed a cryptic subheader. Phase 4, Residual Entity Interference, Acoustic Phase Containment. The file was deleted less than 2 minutes after discovery. Residual Entity Interference. It sounds like pseudoscience until you dig into the lab logs recovered by a defunct audio forensics firm. The firm had been contracted to clean up background interference from underground surveillance tapes. Most files were routine, equipment noise, thermal resonance, air ducts. But one batch, labelled Event 7DKC, stood out. Static loops contained rhythmic clicks, escalating into complex tap sequences. The pattern matched neither Morse nor machine code. One acoustic specialist described it as language trying to mimic language, like something that had heard speech, but didn't understand it. In response, portions of Subtropolis were shut down for structural evaluations. The closures lasted weeks. No structural repairs were ever logged. Instead, satellite images showed heavy equipment convoys arriving under cover of night. Military-style trucks, unmarked vans. But here's the catch. They left empty. The working theory: the echo complex isn't a place, it's a condition, a kind of acoustic infection. A region where sound itself begins to behave abnormally. Echoes repeating with slight alterations, recordings that degrade differently each time they're played, and like any infection, it spreads. That would explain why certain corridors were bricked up, why access zones were forgotten, not to keep people out, but to keep something in, or maybe to keep it from noticing us. Because if the tunnels themselves are listening, then every step, every whisper, every movement adds to the pattern. And once the pattern reaches a threshold, something listens back. This may be why early maps included acoustic dead zones, marked not for silence but for safety. Areas where sound waves cancelled, dissipated, safe zones. Or at least, they were. Now those zones are unstable. And as we push deeper into the underground, the most disturbing question isn't what we'll hear, it's whether we'll still recognise the sound of our own voices when we do. To understand why these tunnels hide so many layers of secrecy, you need to go back to a time when America believed the war of the future wouldn't be fought with armies, but with radiation and silence. During the Cold War, paranoia wasn't just policy, it was infrastructure. Kansas City, with its thick limestone crust and inland location, became the perfect canvas for experiments in survival. Government contractors quietly modified select tunnels into hardened installations. Records from the Army Corps of Engineers mention deep shelter retrofits in the area. Work orders with no listed clients and vague project codes like SC9 Ghost Bay. Local law picked up on it. Residents told stories of black convoys moving equipment into the hills at night. Teenagers dared each other to find the sealed bunker doors rumoured to be hidden behind warehouse facades. But it wasn't until the 1980s that the whispers took shape. That's when a real estate audit uncovered a 2.1-acre subterranean property registered not to a corporation, but to a trust. The trust's listed contacts were all deceased. The address redirected to a law firm that no longer existed. What was found inside the vault? Nothing. Just dust. And silence. But even that silence raised questions, because limestone doesn't settle evenly unless something's displaced it. Around the same time, reports of strange acoustic anomalies increased. Utility workers complained of hearing footsteps in disconnected maintenance corridors. Drone operators mapping airflow patterns encountered signal loss in a hexagonal pattern, an impossible shape for natural echoes. One drone returned with corrupted footage showing a flickering shape in the shadows. Analysts said it was a compression artifact, but the operator quit the next day. Then came the Zone Realignment Orders of 1991. Issued by the Kansas City Urban Infrastructure Board, these reclassified several Subtropolis corridors as non-commercial risk zones. The reason cited? Unstable strata. But geologists found no evidence of movement. What they did find were boreholes, carefully drilled and filled with layers of rubber, concrete and copper mesh. Shielding material, the kind used in Faraday cages. So what were they trying to block? Some think these corridors were used for deep communication testing, military-grade psychotronic transmissions. Think, sonar for the brain. Frequencies so low you don't hear them, you feel them. The same technology rumoured to be part of the infamous sleep tests conducted in US Army facilities during the Cold War. Not to harm, but to alter perception, induce compliance, create silence, not just around you but within you. The deeper you go, the more the walls seem to absorb your voice. Researchers have described auditory vertigo, a disorientation caused not by what you hear but by what you don't. Sound feels muffled, yet there's no obstruction. Your words echo, but out of sync, like they're returning from a different moment in time. Some who've trespassed into abandoned corridors describe seeing strange symbols carved into concrete, spirals and recursive triangles, often centered around sealed hatchways. One claimed that when he touched the symbol, his ears rang for 3 days straight. Another said he saw a light blink behind the wall, like someone had flipped a switch on the other side. Are these Cold War ghosts? Long-abandoned tech? Or is something still active, deep below us, waiting? We found a leaked memo from 2006 stamped KCD Fallout Dampening Phase 2, mentioning a need to reinforce psychological perimeter boundaries. Not physical walls, psychological ones. As if the greatest threat wasn't infiltration. It was a curiosity. They weren't afraid of being breached, they were afraid of being found. And in the spaces where silence is enforced, where echoes return different than they left, maybe the message isn't to keep out. Maybe it's to remind us that we were never meant to be down here at all. You may be wondering, if there really are restricted chambers beneath Kansas City, what's in them now? Some theorists point to Cold War tech, obsolete communication nodes, radiation shelters, forgotten data banks. But others believe those chambers didn't go dark. They went deeper. Whispers of Project Quiet Vault first appeared on encrypted message boards in the mid-2000s. The posts referenced a subterranean complex beneath a commercial site used as camouflage. Descriptions matched Subtropolis. The project allegedly involved experimental containment, not for weapons, but for information. One post claimed servers were being moved underground, not cloud backups, not NSA intercepts, something older, something physical. Meta-archives, the post said, handwritten logs, film reels, unknown media. Why go to such lengths to bury analog content in a digital age? The theory goes like this. Some information is too dangerous to digitize, not because of what it reveals, but because of what it can trigger. Patterns, instructions, ideas, so potent they become infectious, a mimetic hazard. In other words, knowledge as a weapon. The Quiet Vault theory connects to a rash of sudden disappearances in the Kansas City area. Between 2003 and 2011, several university researchers, geologists, and government contractors vanished. Most were working on infrastructure or data archiving. The cases went cold, no bodies, no signs of struggle. One had been researching subterranean signal anomalies. Another filed a patent for sealed analog preservation vaults just weeks before disappearing. We spoke to a local radio technician who claimed his equipment picked up a short-range burst on an unregistered frequency. It sounded like metal scraping, but under it you could hear voices, repeating something, like chanting but broken, like it had been looped wrong. When he tried to isolate the signal, his equipment burned out. Literally, melted wiring. Another informant, an archivist, said she catalogued a box of old military microfilms labelled non-human directive. Before she could finish, the box was pulled. She received a formal reprimand and was placed on administrative leave. She never returned. All this might sound like internet urban legend until you find the buried reports. An FOIA release from 2009 contains a blurred photograph of a steel hatch with the words, "Do not process, archive isolation." The document is mostly redacted, but one phrase remains. Containment breach unlikely, psychological effects are minimal, continue lockdown protocol. Why would any archive require containment? And more chilling, what if the real danger isn't something breaking out, but someone opening it up? We're taught to fear what we don't understand. But beneath Kansas City, maybe the true threat isn't something physical at all. Maybe it's an idea, locked away in the dark for a reason. Because some truths don't want to be known. They wait, silent, patient, until someone listens. And then it's already too late. As we move deeper into the mystery, the question isn't just what's under Kansas City, but rather, why here? Why has Kansas City, of all places, become the locus of so many overlapping conspiracy theories? One answer lies in geography. Kansas City sits at a logistical crossroads, intersected by major rail lines, highways, and telecom hubs. But below the surface, it's built atop 270 million-year-old limestone deposits, forming vast chambers perfect for excavation and temperature-controlled storage. This isn't fiction. In fact, parts of the government already use these underground spaces. FEMA, the IRS, and the Social Security Administration have all leased areas within Subtropolis. But what's officially acknowledged may only be a fraction of what's really there. A leaked 1995 military logistics report described Kansas City as a strategic fallback node. It didn't elaborate, but in emergency protocols, a fallback node is a location prepared to maintain government continuity after catastrophic disruption. During the early 2000s, anonymous whistleblowers claimed there were classified FEMA drills conducted in Kansas City involving subterranean relocation procedures. Simulations included bio-containment scenarios, economic blackouts, and the relocation of essential personnel to hardened underground vaults. One claimed that during one such drill, a transport convoy vanished entirely from GPS tracking inside the limestone complex. No official explanation was given, but the implications run deeper. Some say Kansas City isn't just a fallback location, but a testing ground, a sandbox for infrastructure experiments, mass surveillance without oversight, emergency logistics under real-world conditions, and even crowd-control technologies that never made it to market. Several employees from a former tech startup based in the area, Novadex Systems, anonymously reported that their work on subterranean sensor arrays was bought out and buried, literally. They were ordered to abandon their patents and reassign their designs to a BATO, non-public defense entity. Their project, subsurface motion prediction using acoustic resonance. Sound familiar? That's the same tech used to detect movement behind walls or deep underground. If Kansas City really is a sandbox for such technologies, then it explains the secrecy, the surveillance, the cover stories. But it also raises the next question: what are they watching for? Because maybe it's not just about data or continuity or emergency management. Maybe it's about containment, not of people, but of something else. There's one last layer to this story, one so strange, so elusive, that even believers hesitate to speak it aloud. It doesn't appear in logistics reports or military documents. You won't find it in Freedom of Information releases. It exists only in whispers, in redacted footnotes, and in the space between the official narrative and the things we aren't supposed to know. It's called the residual layer, a rumored zone deep beneath Kansas City's tunnel networks, beneath even the sealed vaults and fallout shelters. Not carved out by human hands, they say, but discovered. According to a leaked exchange on a defunct intelligence forum, the layer was uncovered accidentally during a 1984 expansion initiative near the Blue River facility. A bore drill reportedly dropped 19 feet deeper than expected, into open air. The workers who descended into the chamber said the limestone was different, older, smoother, and cold, far colder than the upper tunnel systems despite geothermal predictions. What they found down there has never been confirmed, but 2 days later, the site was sealed, permanently. Workers were reassigned, equipment was confiscated. One man, an electrical contractor, filed a legal request for unpaid hours. He later withdrew the request and moved out of state. His note to a co-worker simply read, "There's something down there that thinks." Theories spun out fast. Some believe the residual layer is a natural echo chamber that stores sound, even though. Others say it's the buried remains of a pre-human site, an ancient vault not built by us but stumbled into. The residual part, that's what's still in it, or what it's still doing. One anonymous submission to a geological review board claimed that magnetometers went haywire within a specific section of Subtropolis. Compass needles spun continuously. When investigators entered, their watches lost sync. Not stopped, just drifted, as if time moved differently by a fraction of a second. Not enough to notice, but enough to measure. In that same corridor, audio recorders picked up interference described as reverse speech, playing back voices that hadn't been spoken yet. One tape captured a man saying, "Don't go down there," 3 minutes before he actually said it. Could this be electromagnetic feedback? Faulty sensors? A mass hallucination? Maybe. but a now-deleted FEMA training video titled Perimeter Protocols for Cognitive Residue Zones seems to suggest otherwise. It includes directives for personnel who report disorientation, looping perception, or perceived auditory recursion. The last line reads, "Do not pursue unidentified sounds beyond clearance radius. Assume contamination." Contamination by what? Thoughts that aren't yours, memories that echo before they happen, or something deeper, something not content to remain buried. They say the deepest parts of Kansas City's tunnels aren't just quiet, they're active, that the silence is artificial, pressurized, that if you stop moving, stop speaking, and just listen, you'll hear something else breathing. We sent a contact with a thermal camera to a location tagged as Zone 12 Echo Duct. What he brought back wasn't just footage, but confusion. The images were misaligned, depth cues reversed. His camera registered his own footsteps as cold, not warm. He hasn't returned our messages since, because maybe, just maybe, the residual layer isn't beneath Kansas City. Maybe Kansas City was built on top of it. For decades, stranger phenomena have been dismissed as misreadings, technical glitches, sensor errors, hoaxes. But what if those anomalies weren't malfunctions? What if they were warnings? Signals? Echoes of something intentionally hidden, yet constantly trying to bleed through? One former city engineer, speaking on condition of anonymity, claimed that while working on municipal mapping in the early 90s, he encountered spatial discrepancies under the Blue River district. His laser mapping scans would return distorted depths, rooms appearing in the data, then vanishing. The anomalies only showed up during periods of low atmospheric pressure. Like something was breathing with the weather, he said, something that didn't want to be seen. This may sound like science fiction until you realize how many other reports mirror it. Police scanners in the area have picked up unexplained static bursts, sometimes including brief intelligible phrases and distorted voices. One officer's dashcam reportedly caught audio of someone whispering, "Underneath, always underneath," during an otherwise silent patrol. The officer was later hospitalized after what was described as a psychological breakdown. Attempts to trace these signals have failed. One independent group of amateur radio techs traced a source to a point beneath an abandoned limestone loading dock. When they entered, their equipment failed within minutes. The footage they recovered showed nothing unusual, except one frame. Just one. A blurred figure standing at the edge of the frame, not visible before or after. No footsteps, no sound, just presence. And here's where it gets darker. Records from a decommissioned Cold War-era auditory monitoring program, Project Sentinel Echo, describe experiments in deep acoustic pattern isolation. The project had one goal, to listen for non-mechanical phenomena beneath populated areas. Kansas City was one of its primary test zones. The archives reference low-frequency vocal emissions with non-human cadence. Some tapes, never publicly released, were reviewed in secret by acoustic psychologists. One memo noted, "Auditory pattern suggests sentient recursion, possible mimicry, responds to tonal inquiry." In other words, something down there heard the recordings and responded. A few fringe researchers have theorized that the tunnel systems, originally carved for mining, may intersect with something ancient. Not ancient in the historical sense, but in a non-temporal sense, something not of our linear time. Not a creature or machine, but a construct of thought and vibration. One theorist called it a resonant intelligence, something that thinks in frequencies, not words. And when the tunnels were expanded, we may have crossed a threshold we weren't meant to touch. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the repeater incident. In 2008, a fire suppression test triggered in a closed Subtropolis wing known as Section 14B. Security footage was blank. Power was cut to nearby nodes. The only clue was a looping radio transmission caught on a repeater in Raytown. A 5-second burst of tones, followed by a mechanical voice stating, "We are still underneath. You are not alone." It repeated 3 times. The voice wasn't identified. The repeater had no record of being active. When investigators attempted to triangulate the source, the signal vanished. The incident was logged as frequency ghosting due to atmospheric distortion. But the technician who submitted that report later went missing. His last known login on a private audio engineering forum read, "Don't follow the sound, it's not yours." We've now crossed into territory where official explanations dissolve into silence. What we're left with are fragments, leaks, scars in the data. The deeper you go beneath Kansas City, the less stable the world seems. Directions twist, distances warp, and eventually you start to hear things, not just with your ears but in your thoughts, as if the tunnels themselves aren't empty but occupied, not by people, but by patterns, patterns that remember, patterns that don't want to be forgotten. There's one section of the tunnels that appears again and again across decades of leaks, FOIA documents, and even declassified military logistics. Zone 0. A space never acknowledged in official maps, never referenced in tenant leasing records, yet constantly monitored. According to a redacted Department of Defense schematic leaked in 2012, Zone 0 lies beneath the northeast quadrant of Subtropolis, just past the commercial logistics corridors. Officially, that quadrant is vacant. But motion logs from 1998 to 2009, obtained through a corrupted backup server, recorded over 400 entries and exits into that supposedly empty zone. Most occurred between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. No names, no authorization, just IDs, alphanumeric strings that don't match any employee registry. Satellite temperature anomalies suggest it remains active, generating just enough residual heat to signal low-grade electronics or environmental stabilization, something being kept warm or kept alive. One of the few independent researchers to get close to the site, a geology grad student in 2015, claimed he stumbled upon a false wall while documenting seismic inconsistencies in the limestone bedrock. He took photos, now missing, of a metal surface embedded beneath natural stone. He described it as hot to the touch, humming faintly. Days later, he withdrew from his program, citing health reasons. He's since gone off-grid, but others picked up where he left off. A group of digital urban explorers, going by the handle NullTap, managed to intercept a closed-band signal emitted from within Zone 0. The transmission was short, repeating every 23 minutes, 3 tones followed by static and what sounded like mechanical breathing. An auditory forensics expert later determined the pattern was not random. It formed a frequency lock, a digital key meant to be answered. What happens if someone responds? That's not theoretical. In 2021, a hacker group known as RKT7 posted a file dump containing Zone 0 acoustic responses. Their servers were taken down within hours, but copies of the files still circulate. Those who've listened report auditory hallucinations, nausea, and disorientation. One file, when run through a spectrogram, displayed what looked like teeth, not human, not animal, embedded in the waveform. And here's the kicker. Someone built Zone 0 after Subtropolis. The foundational scans from the 1960s show solid limestone, but internal seismic imaging from 1984 onward reveal an empty chamber appearing where no excavation was reported, like a cavity forming in a tooth or a womb forming beneath a body. The working theory, Zone 0 isn't part of the original infrastructure. It was inserted, bored into existence with extreme precision, shielded by radar-absorbing layers, and whatever's in it emits something, not sound, not light, not radiation, but impression. A pulse that triggers anxiety, unease, and most disturbingly, familiarity. Former security personnel have allegedly described dreams of long tunnels filled with mirrors, flickering lights, and a voice that isn't theirs whispering from just behind their left ear. One said, "It doesn't talk, it remembers, and it wants you to remember too." No official agency claims ownership of Zone 0. No public records mention its construction. And yet, every signal, every trace, every encounter points to one thing. Zone 0 is active, and it's listening. The deeper we look, the more we realize some tunnels weren't made by us, some chambers weren't dug, they were grown, and some doors under Kansas City were never meant to open, but someone already has, and they haven't come back. One night in 2016, A private security contractor working the Subtropolis perimeter called in a breach. The tape was never meant to leak, but it did. The audio is grainy, but the voice is clear. I've got movement in corridor 13B, no scheduled personnel. It's not responding to verbal commands. Then silence. Static. And 5 minutes later, a second transmission, voice trembling. It's not walking right, doesn't look human. What followed was a level 3 lockdown across the northeast quadrant of Subtropolis. Officially, it was a fire suppression drill, but staff emails obtained through a data breach show internal chaos. The contractor was never named in the reports. Some say he quit, others say he didn't get the chance. One investigator, working with an underground watchdog group, claimed to have mapped the coordinates of the breach. They aligned again with Zone 0. He theorized the movement wasn't random. It followed a pattern, matching the route used during military fuel transports in the early 1980s. The corridor? Long sealed. But something still knew the path. This wasn't the only incident. A month later, a group of urban spelunkers ventured into a rarely accessed service tunnel and encountered what they described as a man in a gas mask standing still, perfectly still, for over 40 minutes. They turned back, but when they returned with police, the figure was gone. No footprints, no trace on the heat scanner. Just a circle etched into the limestone wall, made with something hot enough to melt the rock. What kind of presence moves with purpose but avoids detection? What entity triggers automated lockdowns yet doesn't trip physical alarms? One theory, shared by fringe analysts and former Black Project technicians, suggests the tunnels beneath Kansas City are not merely holding something, but acting as a channel, a signal repeater, a labyrinth that reshapes itself based on unknown rules of geometry and sound. Some believe the structure is alive, an intelligence formed through the layering of secrets, electrical interference, and human fear. A psychic echo built over decades, drawing in specific types of minds, analysts, geologists, archivists, not to harm them, but to study them, mimic them. When you look at the data over time, a chilling pattern emerges. The disappearances, the phantom movements, the whispering signals, they cluster every 11 years. And the next cycle? It's due. So ask yourself, what's really waiting beneath Kansas City? A secret base, a buried archive, or something older, something that's been there far longer than anyone dares admit, simply wearing the tunnels like a mask, because the more we study the silence, the more it begins to speak back. Beneath the mapped levels of Subtropolis, down a seldom-used utility ramp known to only a handful of contracted personnel, lies one of the most disturbing urban legends of the entire Kansas City underground. They call it the Cemented Room, first whispered about in a 2006 forum post by a geology student on a university field trip. The room was described as eerily perfect. A cube, roughly 12 feet on each side, built entirely from high-density concrete. No entry points, no seams, no record of construction, just a monolith embedded into the cavern floor as though it had always been there or was placed with purpose. The professor leading the field trip later denied its existence, calling it a misinterpretation of structural support. But the student who posted the account included photos. Within hours, the post was flagged and removed. Weeks later, the student withdrew from classes. The username, IP address, and hosting server for the images were wiped from the forum's archive, a rare occurrence that even moderators couldn't explain. Years later, a former sanitation worker named Jamal Easton came forward in a fringe podcast. He said he had been ordered to hose down the area near the Cemented Room weekly, despite there being no foot traffic. He claimed that the floor around the structure was always damp, like it was leaking something, but nothing ever pooled. The water would vanish. More chillingly, Jamal said he once brought a maintenance dog with him. The animal stopped 50 feet from the cube and refused to go further. It whined, scratched at its leash, and urinated on the floor before turning and bolting. That same dog died 48 hours later of unexplained organ failure. The vet said it looked like radiation poisoning, though none of the workers reported exposure. Attempts to drill or scan the room have failed. Devices malfunction, magnetometers spin, and then there's the sound. Several whistleblowers who've been near the structure say they heard a low rhythmic knock from the inside, like someone tapping in code, or something that's not quite human, waiting? What could require this level of burial, erasure, and containment? A failed experiment, a recovered artifact, or something older, discovered during mining operations and sealed away because it couldn't be destroyed? The cemented room may be the key to Kansas City's darkest secret, but the deeper you dig, the more the ground pushes back. In 1997, a retired railroad technician known only as Hal began transmitting nightly on a shortwave frequency that barely anyone noticed. 4,625 kHz. Most assumed it was just another amateur signal, until someone recorded what he was hearing. The broadcast was low and faint at first, a metronome click. Then numbers, strings of them, spoken in a flat synthetic voice. Repeated over and over. Hal believed they were coordinates. Some even matched locations in Subtropolis, ones with no public access. He said he received the first signal after attaching a long copper antenna to the limestone ceiling above his bunker-like apartment near Worlds of Fun. And every night for nearly a year, he claimed the numbers changed, each set leading deeper underground. Reddit threads from the early 2000s picked up the story. Users decoded some of the sequences as locations tied to Cold War fallout shelters. Others pointed to inactive train tunnels that shouldn't have electricity but did. One user posted photos of a room lit only by a green LED with no power cord. The user vanished from the forum 3 days later. The last message Hal ever sent was short. It simply read, "They're not dead down there. They're paused." No one has heard from him since. His equipment was found still running, recording static. But one file, just one, remains unreleased, titled Return Code 7. Is it a hoax? A bored retiree with too much imagination? Or was Hal tuning into something not meant to be found, something trying to make contact from beneath? In 2006, a contracted utility technician reported something strange, a corridor that moved. Not metaphorically, physically. He had been laying down a fiber line in one of Subtropolis's western wings when he entered a straight hallway with 3 marked doors. He marked the entrance with chalk, as standard protocol required, but 30 minutes later, when he attempted to return, there was no chalk and no doors, just a smooth, blank corridor that curved left where there had previously been a right turn. At first, he thought he was disoriented. Underground tunnels can play tricks on the mind, but his body camera, issued by the contracting firm, told a different story. Frame by frame, it captured something impossible, a split-second moment where the walls themselves seemed to shimmer, like heat rising off asphalt, then rearrange. A complaint was filed, quietly withdrawn, and the man was paid severance with an NDA. When local urban explorers heard the story, they attempted to retrace his steps. Most found nothing unusual, but one group posted a chilling update. They discovered a hallway with no ceiling, just pitch black, above a perfect rectangle of fluorescent light. The footage ends abruptly with a loud thud and silence. None of the group were ever identified. Their channel remains inactive, but the video still circulates on dark web archives. Some researchers claim this is evidence of an optical illusion, a mix of geometry and poor lighting. But others suggest it's something far stranger, a non-Euclidean substructure created by unknown forces, either artificial or alive. Because if space can shift underground, then what else is bending? And more importantly, why? In 2018, an anonymous drive was mailed to a local news station. It contained one file, a 19-minute video titled Final Descent, KC Deep. The footage is chaotic, unfocused. A single individual, apparently alone, navigating a tunnel never shown on any official Subtropolis diagram. At first, it's standard. Limestone, pipes, a labelled breaker panel. But then the footage warps, literally. The walls shimmer as if reacting to the presence of the camera itself. The individual descends a spiral stairwell with no visible end. Time codes become erratic. Clocks loop. The radio on his shoulder picks up voices, some distorted, others alarmingly clear. Do not go lower. The camera captures a room filled with expired ID badges. Photos on the wall show workers, but their faces are scratched out. One final frame appears just before the file cuts to black. A door. Not metal, not wood. Something organic. It breathes. Experts tried to authenticate the video, but metadata was stripped. Still, forensic audio confirms the presence of infrasound, frequencies known to induce fear, nausea, and hallucinations. Was it a psychological experiment? A cruel hoax? Or did someone finally reach the bottom? No one has come forward to claim the footage. The station that received it never aired it, but underground forums leaked it within hours. And in every re-upload, the final 4 seconds are always corrupted, except for one phrase, played backward in a child's voice. "I'm still here." Kansas City sleeps above a buried mystery, a puzzle carved in stone and sealed with silence. The deeper we dig, the stranger it becomes, and maybe, just maybe, we were never meant to find the bottom, because what lies beneath isn't just tunnels or technology, it's a threshold, a gate, and someone, or something, is guarding it. Kansas City presents itself as a model of Midwestern progress, a city built on hard work, tradition, and community. But beneath its foundations lies something that defies logic, explanation, and maybe even reality. A hollowed earth humming with unanswered questions, tunnels that lead nowhere, or to places we were never meant to see, disappearances with no suspects, machinery without origin, and corridors that feel aware. In the end, the Subtropolis may be more than just storage space. It might be the surface of something older, deeper, not built by our generation or even for it. We may never know what really waits in the sealed levels or what happened to those who went too far. But one thing is certain, Kansas City sleeps above a mystery that continues to grow, and as long as it remains unacknowledged, it will remain alive. Because the hidden world beneath Kansas City isn't just a forgotten tunnel system, it's a shadow city, watching, waiting, whispering to anyone who dares to descend. So where does all of this leave us? A city built atop ancient limestone, a network of tunnels that should be nothing more than warehouses and salt mines. Yet we've followed a pattern, one stitched together from lost patents, missing persons, encrypted posts, and half-erased government files. What started as a commercial cave system seems to be something much stranger, something unfinished, or perhaps never meant to be found at all. Kansas City, by all appearances, looks like any other city, but beneath its surface lies a cold, carefully managed silence, the kind that doesn't happen by accident. What if these tunnels were never just about storage? What if their real purpose has always been containment? Not of things, but of knowledge. Consider this. Rooms locked behind biometric scanners, buried archives with labels like non-human directive, radio bursts that burn out circuitry, and maps that don't align with the known grid. Then ask yourself, what was so important it had to be locked away in physical form, immune to hacking, firewalled by stone? Some call it the quiet vault. Others say it's a mimetic sinkhole, a place where information goes not to be stored but to be silenced. We're not talking about nuclear secrets or surveillance footage. We're talking about something older, something foundational. A pattern of thought, a phrase, a recording, an arrangement of symbols that changes those who perceive it, a thought virus buried in celluloid and microfilm. A contagion of the mind, the kind of knowledge that spreads not by word of mouth but by resonance. Too strange to be real? Maybe. But what about the people who vanished after working with this material? Archivists, engineers, radio technicians, not one, not two, dozens, each one with ties to subterranean projects, analog data, or unexplained acoustic signals. Some left behind strange logs, others left nothing at all. Their work was reassigned, their traces scrubbed. Only gaps remain, and those gaps tell a story. Kansas City's unique location makes it ideal for continuity of government plans. It's central, shielded by limestone and laced with infrastructure. FEMA, IRS and the SSA openly operate there. But what about the contracts that aren't public? What about the projects without names? When we spoke to ex-defense contractors and local radio experts, the stories were consistent. Unexplainable signal interference, vanishing sensor drones, doors that only open for people who don't return. We're left with possibilities. A structure that doubles as a vault that contains not a person or object, but an idea. And not just any idea, one so volatile it can't exist on the surface. We know what this sounds like, but remember, the most effective cover is always ridicule. Make the truth unbelievable and no one looks twice. Still think it's all myth? Then why redact maps? Why seal physical records in temperature-controlled vaults 160 feet underground? Why erase the names of researchers with clearance? Why does the phrase "psychological effects minimal" appear in a 2009 FOIA release, right above the phrase "continue lockdown protocol"? You don't lock down a myth. So, we leave you with this. What do you believe? Was all of this coincidence? Lost data? Misheard signals? And bored urban explorers inventing stories? Or did we brush up against something real? Something watching from beneath? And if so, is it still waiting? If you live in Kansas City, look closer. If you've seen something strange, tell someone. If you've worked underground, ask what was beneath you. And if you're still listening, know this. You were never supposed to hear this, but now that you have, you're marked as a listener. You've seen what we've uncovered. Not a theory, but a trail. Not an answer, but an opening. Kansas City sits at the intersection of the known and the intentionally forgotten. What lies beneath isn't just rock and archive storage. It's a carefully constructed veil. A network of pathways and purposes deliberately buried under concrete, policy and silence. And now, you know it exists. That knowledge makes you different. You're no longer just a viewer. You're part of the pattern. Someone who's been shown something few are ever meant to notice. Whether you believe the tunnels are hiding psychological experiments, time-locked memory vaults, or something far older, what matters is that you've looked. And the system depends on your eyes staying closed. That's why stories like this disappear. That's why forums go dead. That's why cameras malfunction when they shouldn't, and why FOIA requests return with entire pages blacked out. It's not about denying the truth, it's about exhausting you until you stop asking. But we're not stopping, we're just getting started. If you've ever lived near Kansas City and felt something strange, an absence of sound where there should have been echo, a wrong turn that brought you to a place your GPS couldn't explain, a hum in the walls no one else could hear, we want to hear from you. If you've worked with the postal system, FEMA logistics, underground mapping teams, geological surveys, defense subcontractors, anything that links to that underground grid, your knowledge could complete the picture. If you've seen blueprints that don't match what's physically there, or walked a tunnel that seemed longer coming back than going in, you're not alone. We're building a network of listeners. Not believers, not theorists, listeners. People who pick up on what the surface tries to hide. People who notice what shifts when the power cuts out. People who recognize when silence isn't empty. It's encrypted. Your first action is simple: don't forget. Because forgetting is how the grid resets, it's how the vault stays closed. Your second action, share this file, not just to your feed, but directly to people you trust. Send it encrypted, burn it to DVD, project it in empty spaces, keep it offline if you must, but keep it moving. And finally, tell us what you've seen. We monitor every reply, every log, every whisper that passes through the seams. Your tip might be the key to what was scrubbed from the 1997 tunnel map. Your photograph might reveal the anomaly on level 3C. Your voice might match the echo we recorded in 2022 that no one has been able to trace. And for those who aren't ready to speak yet, listen anyway. Because the hum isn't gone, the frequencies haven't stopped. The doors we walk through in this episode, they weren't closed behind us. They're still open, waiting for someone to enter, waiting for someone to remember. And if you've made it this far, you are that someone. Stay aware, stay alert, and above all, stay beneath. Because the truth doesn't rise to the surface, it sinks.